Hello and welcome back to another delve into the Doctors. I'm Mr. P with Mr. Dave. We're the Geeky Guys, and we've been doing a series of videos where we just have a quick chat about each regeneration of the Doctor as we go through the Doctor's regenerations. And today, well, we finished off with Colin Baker last time, who was the 6th Doctor. So we go on to Sylvester McCoy, who was the 7th regeneration of the Doctor.
It's the 7th iteration.
Again, another 2 years. We tended to find they just did a couple of years on these later ones.
Yeah.
September 87 till December 89.
Yeah.
And his we did say at the end of the last video actually that his regeneration was quite interesting because he actually played both parts. So he came back and pretended to be Colin Baker with a wig and with the coat. In fact, I do believe they had to, because he was a little bit big, didn't they have to let the trousers out a little bit?
Yeah,
to get him into them or something. I seem to remember something about that. But then he pretends to be Colin Baker and regenerates into Sylvester McCoy. And we get an episode which is a rather interesting one because it's called the Time of the Rani.
Time and the Rani.
And the Rani, sorry. Time and the Rani, sorry. The Rani is a female Time Lord, but evil. Yeah. A bit like the Master, I suppose, in a way, which is an evil female Time Lord.
Yeah, it's played by Kate Mara.
Now, we'd only ever seen a Time Lady before in the regeneration of Romana with Tom Baker. So it's nice to have another female Time Lord, if you
person.
like. Time person. And that was good because it's such a nice character, but we don't see it again.
No.
It would have been nice to see the Rani again. And I thought they were going to do that. I honestly thought when, and we'll get to this later on, when Peter Capaldi and you got Missy, I thought she was Rani.
Right.
I honestly thought she was going to be the Rani.
The other time that I thought that might be happening is when the evil lady turned up in Matt Smith's area that stole Amy's baby.
Yeah.
I thought that might have been going that way then as well.
Yeah, Madame Calvarian.
Yeah.
Yeah. So anyway, so we get Time in the Rani, which was good. We end up with the episode Survival was his last episode. He only had 2 companions. So he had Mel, which again he brought through from the previous Baker, one. And Ace, who was his main companion, I guess. Yeah. Played by the fantastic Sophie Aldred, who has just reprised her role more recently in the latest series with Jodie Whittaker.
Yeah. She has, yeah. And she also authored her own Doctor Who book called Childhood's End as well. She's attended loads of the conventions, so she's kept on with Doctor Who throughout her whole life.
She became quite a role model for girls and women because companions, not all of them, but the vast majority of female companions were the ones that ran around and said, "Oh," and screamed a lot.
Screamed and help me, Doctor. Yeah.
And we've got a few exceptions. I mean, Sarah Jane Smith did that a little bit, but she was still, she had a good bit of gumption. And we had, gone out of my head, Leela, who was obviously quite fierce as a woman. But Ace was, she was sort of that everyday sort of, you could identify with her more.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? As a normal, ordinary person that just...
Yeah, very much like Rose Tyler in that way.
Yeah. I mean, Sylvester McCoy, she used to call him the Professor quite a lot.
It's the Doctor.
And he's a lovely guy. We met him. He's so nice, isn't he? But he loves Doctor Who. He loves doing stuff for Doctor Who. And he, of course, was in the 50th unofficial thing we mentioned at the end of the last one, which we said we'd talk about later on when we get to it. He did like a cup of tea. He always had they always had gimmicks, and we talked about the fact that Tom Baker had the long scarf, Peter Davidson had the celery,
the cricket stuff.
Colin Baker had the fancy coat.
Yeah.
Whereas Sylvester McCoy had the umbrella with the question mark.
Yeah, it was all question marks, wasn't it, with Sylvester McCoy's portrayal. And like you said, with the question mark umbrella and everything else. But yeah, I think, again, it was similar to sort of the last two, where it was kind of making the best of the small budget that they'd got. It was a very quick decision to carry on, and then it was sounding like it was not going to go back the right way again. It was probably going to get cancelled. But again, the standout episodes in there, like we say, good companion coming in with Ace. some good classic episodes, a reuniting with the Brigadier as well during his time, which was nice, which was good. Good old Nicholas Courtney. So I think it was a good tenure in difficult circumstances.
There's two things that I wanted to just mention. One is that Sylvester McCoy's Doctor was a lot more, not evil, darker than some of the others. He'd let that darker side out.
He kind of had it was kind of a bit of a mix between sort of 6 and 2, wasn't it? Where he kind of had that angry sort of Scottish authoritarian, would do the big shouty speeches with Davros and, complaining about the Daleks and about the Time Lords and stuff. But then also there was kind of the whimsical side of like the jokey things with Ace and playing spoons and being patronising to the enemy and things like that. So there was elements of 2 and 6 in there, and he made it obviously his own role as well. But I think there was the mix of the hard, aggressive, and then the comic as well.
He made a lot of hard choices, and he said himself in interviews his Doctor was a bit darker. It was, you got to see just a little peek more than you perhaps had before. Into the fact that the Doctor is the sort of person that would, if you've got these enemies there, he'll destroy you. We use the word destroy, but it's quite a big word.
And certainly he certainly highlighted the alien side again, didn't he? Like Colin Baker had, and set himself apart from the humans, and he was a Gallifreyan Time Lord.
And the other thing I did want to say was that we talked about budget being cut.
Yeah.
I mean, during his tenure as the Doctor, there was no budget at all. I mean, they at one point they didn't realise they were coming back to do another story, and they just dismantled the entire TARDIS set.
Yeah.
It had gone. Then they needed it for a story, but rather than spend the money and put it all up, you'll notice that in one of the last episodes where there's the TARDIS, it's very dark and it's dimly lit, and they story it away by saying that the TARDIS is on some kind of low power mode or whatever. But actually, they hadn't got half the walls; it was just black curtains, and they had made the set in the car park. They put the set together on the car park because they haven't got a soundstage to put it in. They didn't want to spend all the money. So it was really bad. I feel really sorry for Sylvester McCoy having to go out like that.
Yeah,
but
it's not good, is it?
He did get a chance.
Yeah.
Come back one last time.
Yeah, I mean, what we ought to talk about here as well is obviously we had Survival, we had kind of the Doctor and Ace skipping off back to Perivale, and we kind of hoped that there would be a turnaround of decision again, and it would come back, and we'd get a bit more Sylvester McCoy, or we'd get another Doctor coming along, and then kind of Doctor Who disappeared.
Yeah, it was never cancelled.
No,
they stopped making it.
Stopped making it. So all we had was literally the comics and the novelisations.
So from the end of December in '89, there was no Doctor Who till 1996.
Yeah.
And at that time, the BBC decided to go into America. That's the idea. And they did that, and they thought, well, we're going to have to regenerate the Doctor. We need a new Doctor. We need a new TARDIS. They filmed it all in the US. And that's where we cue our 8th Doctor, which was, of course, Paul McGann.
Yeah. I mean, the obviously it was the first proper attempt, really, to take Doctor Who onto a global stage, wasn't it? Yeah. And the idea was that they would raise money, they would raise interest around the globe, bring some good people to get involved with the show and to make it good again. And I think the original plan is that the TV movie would spark a new series pretty quickly after, with probably Paul McGann as the 8th Doctor and do that. Obviously, unfortunately, that didn't happen.
They made a lot of silly mistakes, unfortunately. And you rewatch it now, and actually it's all right. It's not bad. Quite enjoy it. And Paul McGann did a fantastic job as the Doctor.
He was very good. Yeah.
And they changed the sort of comical, whimsical dress sense, and then they kind of put him back into something a little bit more standard. It was. I mean, this dress here is not the one from that, but it's still quite reminiscent. It was a longish coat and a bit of a shirt,
bit of a cravat.
And it was a little bit more normally dressed.
Yeah, it was kind of like Edwardian-esque kind of smart dress, wasn't it? But yeah, we like you said, we had a it didn't really. The other thing is it didn't really continue on from the last episode of the normal series either, did it? We kind of had him transporting the Master back to Gallifrey.
Yeah, it kind of, the way I see it is what happened was you end up with Sylvester McCoy's last episode, and then some time has now passed.
Yeah.
Where that companion's not there anymore, and we get on a voiceover. Paul McGann's voiceover from the '96 movie at the beginning was that the Time Lords wanted to send the remains of the Master, who's they apparently think he's passed away. They want to take the remains back, and the Doctor was asked to transport them, and they said that was a mistake because he was not completely gone, and he manages to make the TARDIS crash land on Earth and escape. So the Doctor, was it Chicago?
Yeah.
Or Seattle, one or the other. It comes out the TARDIS and just gets shot, which is a lovely way of saying what they thought of America at the time.
Yeah.
The Doctor just comes out of a box and all of a sudden a load of gang people just shoot him. It's like, well, that pretty much sums up America right now, quite frankly.
And then they
political about that.
And then they kind of established the kind of alienness of the Doctor by taking him to the hospital, and they're confused, and the two hearts and the vascular pulmonary system, they can't understand it, and they're making it worse.
He regenerates basically in the morgue, and is confused and dazed again, and not quite sure who he is. And
oh God, Chicago hospitals killed the Doctor.
Yeah. But then he obviously finds out the Master's escaped and has to stop him. This came out in '96, but it was actually set at the turn of the millennium.
Yes, that's right. Yeah, with the atomic clock and going into 2000.
You know what? It was actually a fairly good story. I quite liked it.
Yeah, I think reflecting back on it now, you can kind of take it for what it is, and it's got enjoyable elements.
There were things that happened in this that at the time people were in uproar about.
Oh,
he
God,
kissed his companion.
Yeah, which people didn't like.
You get to 2005 and the Doctor's snogging everybody.
Yeah, nobody says that then, do they?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's very interesting that. And I think the fact as well that we had the bit that, again, we've had repeated in Doctor Who later on, is we've had the point where Paul McGann's regenerated, he's not quite sure who he is yet, and
it took a while.
He's remembering little bits, and there's a bit where he's walking with Daffy and Ashbrook, Grace Holloway, who's a companion who he meets at the hospital, and she's trying to question him about his life and stuff, and he's like, oh, I vaguely remember my parents, and vaguely remember living in a city called Gallifrey and stuff. And she's like, what? Never heard of it and stuff. And there's that quite nice bit where he's become kind of more human. The elements of the Doctor haven't quite come through yet. Yeah, which is quite fun.
We're not going to dwell too much on it because, there's lovely little nods to the past.
Yeah.
A little bowl of jelly babies, and he's got a 2,000-year diary or something on the desk, and he's reading The Time Machine by H.G. Wells. It starts with him on the TARDIS, sat in a sitting room area just off the TARDIS control room with a cup of tea, and it's Sylvester McCoy. And he ends the same way. So at the end of the episode, Paul McGann sits down, carries on eating jelly babies and reading the book to finish. And that would have been a lovely lead into a new series, but sadly the ratings just weren't there.
No, it didn't. It didn't happen, and unfortunately, we didn't see Paul McGann again for a little while. After that.
We didn't see him, but we did hear him. So he went off. It's interesting because we said Tom Baker was the longest running Doctor on screen, but actually, in actual longest running before anyone else steps in, it was Paul McGann. Yeah. From '96 to 2005,
he was still the Doctor. Yeah,
because it never got cancelled. And there was never a new
Doctor. Didn't happen. That was all.
Or at least so we thought. We've since learned there was a War Doctor in between, but we'll come to him later on.
Yeah.
So Paul McGann was is technically the longest running Doctor, if you don't count, because he was a Big Finish Doctor on audio, and he had lots of companions. And what's beautiful about this is that he was in a special short for the 50th anniversary called Night of the Doctor, and he actually quotes his companions, and it shows you how he regenerates into the War Doctor.
Yeah.
And he mentions Charlie, Destry, Lucy and Sam, which technically makes them canon. Yeah. It now makes the whole Big Finish stuff canon, which is really fun.
That's right. I mean that's the thing that you do forget sometimes especially with some of these older classic Doctors, is that they've actually fleshed out their time as the Doctor now with all these Big Finish audios, and I think we were looking earlier, I think Paul McGann's done about 70 of them now or something ridiculous. which is ridiculous good, not ridiculous bad, obviously. But yeah, and like you said, he's got all these companions. There's all
Just
this
interrupting, even Chris
extra stuff.
Eccleston's come back and done some now.
Yeah,
That's
even
been
he's
finished.
done it as well. Sylvester McCoy has, Colin Baker has, Tom Baker has. So they've all kind of continued their Doctor's story a little bit. So those ones that were cut short have kind of been redeemed a little bit, and done a bit more of what they wanted to do. And I've heard interviews with Colin Baker and Sylvester McCoy where they've said, you know, we've been able to explore what would have happened to their Doctor going forward if, you know, they'd done a few more stories and been through some extra things.
Yeah. But I mean, still, it was a good film, worth a watch. Just if nothing but just to see Paul McGann as the Doctor.
Yeah, yeah, and to see he's still in a similar costume, but he's still that same Eighth Doctor that you remember. He's kind of like the romantic who tries to see the best in everything, and it's the first kind of indication of always be kind and that sort of thing, which you have reflected later on. And you know, he's got that. There's that nice comment where he's on the ship, and because of the Time War and everything, the people are like not thinking of the Time Lords in a positive way, and he's like, "Oh no, please, I'm one of the nice ones."
Yeah, that's the Night of the Doctor.
That's the Night of the Doctor special. So that was good.
Yeah, it was nice to see him back. And you know, I mean, we met him again. Well, we met nearly all of them. But
we actually had a picture with the TARDIS console from the '96 movie console, as well.
Yeah, which looked a bit worse for wear at that point, to be honest. But it was still cool to see it. And Paul McGann was right into the photo shoot, if I remember. He's like, let's fly this thing. And he's like,
yeah, it's great with his fans. You see it a lot online, pictures and videos where he's very close to the fans and like will sit talking to them for half an hour, which is really, really good.
Sadly, however, as the ratings weren't fantastic, it didn't really happen. It went on and it continued on its hiatus until 2005, and we will pick that up in the next video. Thank you so much for watching. You can find all our stuff on our socials and on geekyguys.co.uk. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and we'll see you next time.